On gunshots were fired near the Prime Minister's residence as protesters try to storm the area. Mobs have also stormed the parliament. Sources are now indicating that the army could take over to establish law and order. India has urged calm and issued an advisory to nationals in Nepal. First, it was Sri Lanka, then Bangladesh, and now Nepal. The question is Nepal heading the Dhaka way? That's in fact the question we will also be probing in just a bit. But News 18's Anand Tiwari has shared the latest update on Nepal's situation from ground zero. Let's listen in.
जैसे ही नेपाल के प्रधानमंत्री ने इस्तीफा दिया उसके बाद आप देख सकते हैं हालात और ज़्यादा बदतर हो गए हैं और इस वक्त हम एक हाई राइज बिल्डिंग पर खड़े हुए हैं और यहाँ से मेरे कैमरा पर्सन युगल आपको सीधी तस्वीर दिखाएंगे। देखिए बिल्कुल मेरे सामने ये पार्लियामेंट है जो धू-धू करके पूरी तरह से जल रहा है और ये बाजू में एक होटल है और एक बैंक है, ये पूरी तरह से जल गया। ये बिल्कुल एक्सक्लूसिव तस्वीरें हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं जान जोखिम में डाल के, क्योंकि नीचे उग्र प्रदर्शनकारी हैं, लोगों का गुस्सा शांत नहीं हो रहा है। लोग भ्रष्टाचार और जो करप्शन था उससे यहाँ पर त्रस्त हो चुके थे और उनका लगातार कहना था कि जो यहाँ की सरकार है उसने युवाओं के बारे में कोई सुध नहीं ली और जो करप्शन का मुद्दा था वो इतना ज़्यादा हावी हुआ कि उसके बाद सरकार को बैकफुट पे आना पड़ा। लेकिन कल जिस तरह से जो निर्दोष छात्र थे उनकी मौत हुई है दर्दनाक, उससे जो लोग थे वो और ज़्यादा आक्रोशित हो गए। आप देखिए पूरा धुएं का गुबार जो है यहाँ पर इस पूरी सड़क पर आपको नजर आएगा। ये बिल्कुल वीआईपी जोन है जहाँ पर कि मेरे ठीक सामने जो आपको तस्वीरें दिखा रहे हैं युगल, ये पार्लियामेंट है और ये पूरी तरह से आप देख सकते हैं धू-धू करके जल रहा है। यहाँ पे सारा फर्नीचर तोड़ दिया गया है और ये आगजनी की तस्वीरें यहाँ पे मैं आपको दिखाऊंगा। देखिए ये बिल्कुल एक्सक्लूसिव तस्वीरें यहाँ से दिखाएंगे कि किस तरह से पार्लियामेंट पूरी तरह से आग की लपटों में घिरा हुआ नजर आ रहा है। यहाँ पर एक बैंक था उससे सटा हुआ और एक होटल था जो पूरी तरह से जल गया है, उसके शीशे सारे टूट चुके हैं। जो लोग हैं प्रदर्शनकारी है वो सड़कों पर हैं, पुलिस नदारत है और जो आर्मी है अब उसके कंट्रोल में पूरा नेपाल शहर है, पूरा काठमांडू है। लोगों का गुस्सा शांत नहीं हो रहा है। 4 मंत्रियों ने इस्तीफा दिया, 20 से ज्यादा सांसदों ने इस्तीफा दिया। प्रधानमंत्री के बारे में खबर आ रही है कि वो देश छोड़ के भाग गए हैं और ऐसे में अब नेपाल का भविष्य आगे क्या होगा, नेपाल की सत्ता किसके पास काबिज होगी। इमरजेंसी जैसे हालात जो है वो पूरी तरह से नेपाल में बन गए हैं और ये तस्वीरें हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं कि किस तरह से ये पूरा काला धुएं का जो गुबार है पूरे काठमांडू में नजर आ रहा है। हम संसद भवन के पास हैं, कुछ लोगों से बात भी करेंगे, युवाओं से जिनकी बात को सुना नहीं गया। और देखिए ये संसद भवन की तस्वीरें दिखा रहे हैं जो पूरी तरह से आग की चपटों में यहाँ पे जो अराजकता फैली हुई थी, जो सरकार जो नेता थे उन्होंने लोगों की सुनी नहीं। यहाँ पे युवाओं के बारे में उन्होंने डेवलपमेंट के बारे में नहीं सुना और यही वजह था कि आज नेपाल जल रहा है। आपको दुख हो रहा है आपका नेपाल जल रहा है?
बहुत ज़्यादा दुख हो रहा है। इसका दुख तो हम व्यक्त करके बता भी नहीं सकते। ये अभी क्या
देखिए बहुत रिस्की जगह है, ये सिलेंडर फटा है यहाँ पर। और हम आगे आइए चलते हैं, ये तस्वीरें हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री देश छोड़ के चले गए इस्तीफा देके।
इसकी तो एक्चुअल कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन हमको आज तक अभी तक पता नहीं लगी है, मगर अगर वो भाग भी गए तो उससे कोई फर्क पड़ने वाला खास में नहीं है, क्योंकि अब गवर्नमेंट अब अच्छे लीडर अगर गवर्नमेंट ओवरटेक कर लेंगे तो वो जहाँ भी नेपाल में किसी भी कोने पे वो छुपेंगे उनको आसानी से।
सरकार अब क्या रहेगा नेपाल का?
अब ये जो पुराना लोग हैं ना वो कोई नहीं चला सकता है। अब युवक चाहिए, युवक चाहिए। अब युवक ये चलाएगा, ये पुराना जितना है वो सब बाइकाट।
तो देखिए युवाओं के हवाले अब ये देश होना चाहिए, युवा नेता होना चाहिए। देखिए ये सीधी तस्वीरें हम दिखा रहे हैं, ये संसद भवन है जो पूरी तरह से आग की लपटों में आ गया। लोगों का गुस्सा था, यहाँ पे जो अराजकता फैली हुई थी, जो सरकार जो नेता थे उन्होंने लोगों की सुनी नहीं। यहाँ पे युवाओं के बारे में उन्होंने डेवलपमेंट के बारे में नहीं सुना और यही वजह था कि आज नेपाल जल रहा है।
All right, so as Nepal continues to burn, we at CNN News 18 have been tracking all the latest developments from ground zero for you. Let's quickly go across to Siddhant, who will furnish us with the latest inputs. Siddhant, as of now, what will ensure that law and order is restored at the soonest? Are we expecting the army to step in?
Well, Akanksha, situation still remains tensed. In fact, Chief Secretary, Army and the Mayor of Kathmandu, they all have come up with an appeal to the protesters to show restraint and to stop the violence. But what I'm getting to know from people, those who are on ground, the situation is still tensed. In fact, many journalists have been attacked, Akanksha. their vehicles have been set on fire. The buildings, the politician houses, and the buildings of national pride have also been vandalized by the protesters. It's exactly the repeat of what we saw in Bangladesh a year back. And now Manoj Gupta is bringing for us that army is likely to take control of Nepal, and army will be running the country till it gets a new model of governance. But when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, when could we see the army on the streets of Kathmandu? Because situation is so bad that nobody is safe. No area in Kathmandu is safe at this point in time. In fact, the Indian government has also come up with an advisory for the Indian citizens, asking them to remain indoor, not to go out in Kathmandu. So
Siddhant, whether it is the current dispensation, the ministers from the current Oli dispensation, or say the former Prime Minister also being attacked, is this now an indication that the anger on the streets is against the wider political elite and not just the Oli government?
Well, yes, that's right, Akanksha. So, this has been in the making from a very long time. In fact, in April, there was a massive protest in Kathmandu against the electricity bill. Before that, in February, we reported that how there was the pro-monarchy campaign which was going on. So, this has been in the making, and this government has failed miserably. It is against the oppression, the tyranny of Oli, CP Sharma Oli's government, and how they have been functioning. They came into power on the promise of stabilizing the economy of Nepal, providing more jobs to the youth, but they couldn't fulfill those promises. And there's a lot of corruption charges on the government, nepotism charges, backdoor entry of those who are close to Prime Minister Oli into the government positions, etc., etc. So all those things were, piling up, and perhaps this became the reason. The trigger happened when the social media ban was imposed, and perhaps that became the trigger point. And the protesters came on the street, and the protest is started. And now CP Sharma Oli has resigned. But the future of Nepal is still vague. Perhaps army is going to take over. What's going to be the future of Nepal? Whether this protest will continue for a few more days, or whether protesters will go back home. Perhaps there's very little clarity on that.
Stay with me, Siddhant, as we track all the developments. Remember, as Siddhant has been highlighting, that these are not developments that have taken place overnight. There's in fact an entire timeline which I'd like to in fact bring to you. As far as the entire unrest is concerned, it all began on 4th of September this year, when the Nepalese government in fact went ahead with its decision to ban 26 social media platforms. That includes Instagram, X, YouTube, Facebook, all of them. On 8th of September this year, the Gen Z protesters, as they have been nicknamed, they hit the streets against this ban on social media. They said that this is a direct crackdown on freedom of speech and expression. On 8th of September, the protesters then clashed with the cops. At least 19 people were killed. This was what we witnessed on the streets of Kathmandu just yesterday. 19 youth, in fact, killed as the Nepalese police went ahead firing rubber bullets. They fired tear gas at these peaceful protesters. They are accusing the government of hijacking, in fact, even the opposition parties of hijacking. Now, at the same time, there were demands of a resignation for KP Sharma Oli to in fact step forward and resign, and today is the big day which will go in the annals of history. On 9th of September, that is when Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli finally resigned. Remember, he was in his 4th term as the Prime Minister of Nepal when he tendered in that resignation. This after 4 ministers from his government in fact went ahead with their own resignations. We are continuing to bring you all the latest inputs. In fact, we are getting in some breaking inputs on this news story. Protesters have set the Supreme Court in Kathmandu on fire. This amid anti-government protests is what we are learning, as Siddhant was also highlighting, that the situation on ground level continues to remain extremely fragile. And in the latest input that we are bringing to you is that the protesters have set the Supreme Court in Kathmandu on fire. Remember, they have been breaching all the high security zones. That includes not just the parliament, but in the latest, what we can tell you is that these protesters have gone ahead and set the Supreme Court on fire amid these anti-government protests, which are only snowballing by the hour. And it seems that the government, of course, has completely failed, but the army is now contemplating on when to step in and in fact control the law and order situation on the ground level. But what we can tell you in the latest that's coming in is that the protesters have gone ahead and set the Supreme Court on fire, and this indeed is going to mean more trouble for Nepal. Let's quickly go across to Akhilesh Upadhyay, who's a columnist and a former editor at Kathmandu Times. He's also joining us. Akhilesh, if I could bring you in on this piece of very disturbing breaking input that's coming in, that the protesters have set the Supreme Court on fire in Kathmandu. What are you learning and what can you share with us?
Okay, first of all, I was the editor of the Kathmandu Post.
All right.
And okay, I look at, observing the ground situation very closely last 2 days. And it was unfortunate when it started, but looks like the Gen Z protesters are, moving forward. Their demands of Prime Minister's ousters has been met. But I've also noticed, as much as I follow it closely, both on the ground and in the telephone, the appeal for calm, which is coming from the mayor of Kathmandu, who could possibly be one of the interim leaders during the transition, it will probably take a while to kind of percolate down to the protesters who are already out and about. So that being the case, the transition process has begun, if not in technical terms, political terms. For example, the protest rally I saw from my home terrace, which is very close to the Prime Minister who has resigned his office, has just turned into a victory rally. The same people, same folks, same crowd, same youth, and you can see the temperature come down, But for it all to soak in, given the fact that they are the Gen Z are young protesters on the ground and out and about, it'll take a while to come down, I think.
Akhilesh, what are you learning in terms of who is responsible for this kind of vandalism and arson that we are witnessing on the streets of Kathmandu? In fact, several other journalists that we've been speaking to are saying that many with their own political agenda, perhaps in the opposition, have also hijacked these protests. Is it these Gen Z protesters who are in fact responsible for this kind of harm that's being done to Kathmandu?
Gen Z protesters that I saw yesterday, actually on the ground, are in school uniforms, unarmed, and you can think of like average college students, 20, 21 year old, and many were young girls,
Okay.
So I don't expect them to be armed or use arsons, etc. And I don't want to speculate wildly and say there's infiltration, but at least for the Gen Z protesters that I've been seeing on the ground, including at the Prime Minister's party office for 4 hours, none of them were armed. There was no infiltration. I was with the protester for several hours. So we shall see how it goes, though. I qualify.
Akhilesh, it's interesting that you also mentioned the name of Balendra Saha, who is in fact being touted as a probable now next interim chief for Nepal at the moment. What makes you say that he will perhaps have that kind of effect on Gen Z, which maybe the army is unable to in fact sort of do right now in terms of making that point be heard as far as the protesters are concerned to call upon more calm in Nepal?
Yeah, I would like to say that tonight and the next 24 hours will remain extremely crucial, because despite all the state apparatus, why did the past government fail? Because it had lost its political legitimacy, though it had parliamentary majority. The two biggest parties were in government, the CP and UML, the Prime Minister's party, and Deuba's party, which is the largest party. So in fact, they comfortably have majority. well past the majority. Now, the key question is, well, army can be deployed, but cannot be deployed yet without the legitimacy, perceived legitimacy on the ground. And hence, because Nepal's army doesn't have that adventurous record, I can see that they're probably even reluctant to go out and about immediately and resort to violence, That could mean quickly also then losing your legitimacy in the public eye in a world that is so wired. Don't forget the Gen Z generation, and everyone reads, kind of consumes news in real time, So I can see that stuff has started, In his statement, Balin said that prepare to hold talks with that we will be holding talks with the army in the hours. This is one. And also the second point, that the other party, one of the largest party, which has remained out of the government, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, they have a proper organized structure, across the nation, though a very new party. That's another scenario I don't rule out, that Balin doesn't have a party per se, just a one-man, a pretty popular guy in Kathmandu. But yeah, those forces will come into play, and my information says that there's a lot of backroom talks already going on.
All right. And since you talk about these backroom talks, the role that youth is playing, how do you analyze the kind of parallels when it comes to the protests in Nepal vis-a-vis the ones that have already taken place in Bangladesh just slightly more than a year ago in August, when we saw the Sheikh Hasina government being, dethroned over there? And similarly, we've seen the role that youth have played, especially in Sri Lanka as well. So what is your assessment of the role that the youth or the so-called Gen Z protesters are playing in Nepal?
There's a lot of commonality, but there is also a lot of things that are uncommon. First, what's common? They are students, they are angry, and they are fed up with the establishment, political establishment, both. Religion, however, hasn't played a crucial role in Nepal's politics. There's no, as some party that is very closely aligned with a certain religion in Pakistan, Here it is a very different case, All the major parties have been largely secular to this day. And the largest party that gets vote in terms of its support for Hinduism is one of the fourth or fifth largest party, So that has been the case. And I see this is extremely secular, this movement, but also there are so many forces intertwined, and it'll be a while before one or two or three leaders begin to emerge from the mass. For example, yesterday I was talking to a lady, one of the protesters on the ground, probably 24, and she said, "Oh, it's so cathartic to see people my age on the ground who I didn't know, and we speak similar voice." So there is a lot of hope in the way they express themselves, But of course, in no way should violence be condoned.
All right, Akhilesh, going to request you to continue staying with us. The big talking point right now, in fact, so to say, this hour is Balendra Shah. Who is he? Is he going to be Nepal's next leader? That's the big question everybody is asking right now. Who is he? He was born in 1990 in Kathmandu itself. As far as his education is concerned, he is an engineer from Kathmandu University, and as far as his post is concerned, he was elected as the Kathmandu mayor in the year 2022. What are his unique selling points? He's extremely popular among the youth, a point that was also being made by Akhilesh when he said that he's reached out to the Gen Z protesters, urged them to maintain calm and, in fact, peace and order. He's also known for his good urban planning as far as Kathmandu is concerned. He's also aiming to make Kathmandu a clean city, able to unite people behind him. That's the kind of power that he commands. I quickly go back to Akhilesh, who continues to stay with us. So Akhilesh, I'd like to bring in your inputs on Balendra as well, and what makes him, or rather what positions him so uniquely to be considered as far as for the post or for the role of an interim advisor in Nepal.
Okay. before I go into Balinsa, who I have followed very closely, I don't want to deify any leaders, at a certain point in time. There's this human element to it. We all
Sure.
tend to do that and quickly vilify others,
Right.
At best, we are all gray creatures, neither black nor white. That said, the thing that has made him quickly popular among the young people is he doesn't have what others have, which is party. He is unique in that sense. And because he doesn't have party, he doesn't have that party patronage to sell to the crowd, And he doesn't have a contractor to sell a contract to get more parties or more karyakartas in his fold, And I don't know. I know a few people who are very close to him. He doesn't have any karyakartas per se, kind of party cadres to work with. Yeah?
So,
He's also seen as generally educated, very clean, sometimes straightforward, so straightforward that the fellow politicians who he needs to take along don't get it. And he's seen that his constituency are not fellow politicians. He straight talk to the audience, which is on the ground, and social media. He's extremely popular on social media or his websites or his posts.
all right. So, Akhilesh, the point that you're also making is very important because you're saying that he's seen as an independent person, not having any political affiliations. At a time, this entire movement is against the political elite, not just against the Oli dispensation. Where does this leave the proponents of democracy, given that we've seen 14 governmental changes in 16 years in Nepal?
Oh, excellent point. This is why I say, as important as ground swells are for changes. For example, the parliament was last elected only 3 years ago, but there have been several government changes already, right? And the cabinets keep on changing in their colors, which means this one's coming in, this one's going out. I even, as closely as I may try, I lose track of some of who's in the cabinet and which position does he hold, or is he still in the cabinet? Now, that being the case, in order for Nepal's democracy not get derailed, you need public acceptance in these extreme stressful situations. Nepal is currently going through extreme stress, as I would like to call it, And that means if we go too far and kind of centralize within authority, then there's a danger of derailment of the process rather than, a solidifying of the institutions, which are very crucial in the long run.
And
So
that's interesting that you talk about solidifying the faith in democracy, also respecting institutions, given that the chairperson of the electricity board was also fired very abruptly by KP Sharma Oli, and that also sort of had an impact on the youth, given the role that he had played during the entire load shedding crisis that had plagued Nepal. So take us through why the successive governments have in fact displayed this disrespect towards constitutional institutions, also resorted to corruption.
Okay, lovely. The answer is the same, May it be Deuba, may it be Prasanta, or may it be Oli, the multiple prime minister we've had most time since 1990, since the democracy was restored and monarchy was, abolished, abolished in 2008, but, put in the more cagey situation since 1990. These parties have been ruling the roost. And are people getting results? No. Are they frustrated? Deeply. Are a lot of people saying, okay, this is it, I will not see a change in my life?
All right, Akhilesh, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I'll have to quickly take in some breaking inputs that have come in just now. In fact, what we're learning is that former Nepal Prime Minister Jhalanath Khanal's wife has suffered severe burn injuries. This after being attacked by the vandals. In fact, that's the latest piece of information. So first, what we were learning was that the Supreme Court in Kathmandu was set on fire. And in more breaking inputs, what we are learning is that the former Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Khanal's wife in Kathmandu has been attacked. In fact, so much so she's also suffered burn marks and injuries. And this is very much in line with what has been happening so far, not just with the former Prime Minister, but also we've seen happen with the ministers in the KP Sharma Oli cabinet, where we've seen visuals also of the finance minister being chased and running amok on the road. And the latest, what we can tell you is that the former Prime Minister of Nepal, Jhalanath Khanal's wife, has suffered these burn injuries. Very disturbing visuals, in fact, coming over there. If I may show them to you, she's almost collapsed on the road over here, as she's also surrounded by the forces who are checking in on her. But in inputs that we are receiving so far is that she was burnt by the vandals. Who are these protesters? Are they the Gen Z protesters? We do not know. Or are there political parties? We still can't say for sure. But in fact, that's Jhalanath's wife, completely collapsed on the road as the forces continue to check in on her. On that note, let me quickly go across to Siddhant, who will share more inputs with us. But remember, this is not all right. So you can see a closer view of that. She's in fact suffered severe burn marks, as what we can see, and she's in fact in an unconscious state. It's a very, very serious condition from what it appears. Unfortunately, very tragic visuals coming in. Akhilesh continues to stay with us. Akhilesh, what do you make of this kind of tragic visuals, in fact, coming across? Who is responsible for this kind of vandalism, the arson and these kind of attacks? That too, I mean, eventually at the end of the day, they are all members of the politics in Nepal. You're looking at the wife of the former Prime Minister.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, it is not good. These unfortunate developments, despite the larger light at the end of the tunnel, you know. And this will definitely impact the transition and drag it rather than have a broader, quick political acceptance. And I've just posted actually on my own Twitter saying that appealing to Gen Z to stay calm and give transition a space and let it work, you know. And then I see similar appeals from people across the not the parties. The parties for now are like not seen as like credible messengers, but others, you know, kind of like thought leaders, writers, civil society representatives, you know, it's come across, you know. And then if there is one single message that's trending in the social media, other than these the incidents of violence, etc., it's one singular appeal for calm.
But Akhilesh, what can you share with us with regards to the protesters? Because till yesterday, in fact till today, all the protesters that we have been speaking to have said that we always wanted to protest peacefully, and that our protests have in fact been hijacked by certain political elements, even foreign elements. What is it that you can share with us? Akhilesh, if you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
What is it that you can share with us with regards to these protesters? Are they just Gen Z protesters, or is there an involvement of outsiders as well, whether political or foreign NGOs?
Not foreign NGOs, I think. I would like to hope not the parties that have been discredited. But as a protest as broad-based as this, there's always a danger, you know. There's no unifying force or two. There's no unifying voice. You know, Balin is popular, doesn't mean he's a leader accepted across the board. Gen Z, yes, but how do you even define Gen Z anyway? You know, does every household person is a big follower of Balin Shah, currently the most popular face, it seems, yeah? So it'll probably take a while, you know, next 2 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours before everything coalesces into place. I hope sooner than later, honestly. I don't like the disturbing images myself, some of them trending on my own social media, you know, handles. But we shall see. That's all I can say as an honest analyst, and don't want to over speculate over events that I don't have enough information
That
about.
also begs the question, why have the forces, including the army, failed to contain this kind of anger, the vandalism and arson that we are witnessing, and the kind of attacks we are seeing against all of the political elite?
Yeah, I would like to think this, Balin has been a mayor, right? He's not been a national leader yet. So he's got to grow a pace, fast, and say, what does it require to be a good, it's nice to be a good mayor, right? Controlling a city, not even its every aspects of its life. Now it's an entirely different thing to control a country in serious crisis. And how do you mobilize the forces you don't know, or you are beginning to know? Do you have enough support from the people who have just been discredited, or they really want to discredit?
All right, Akhilesh, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I can see some breaking inputs coming in that President Ram has in fact resigned as far as the Nepalese president is concerned, and what we are also being told is that the army is going to make an address. I quickly want to take that forward with you, Akhilesh. What do you make of the army's address now? What should we expect as far as that address that's all set to take place in some time from now? The army chief of Nepal will be making that address.
I don't know what will. Are you asking me a question there?
Yes.
I don't know what he will, but he will definitely appeal for calm. But also, one to have some kind of like political, to be seen as also not how interventionist force, more an assisting force. That's the history of Nepal army, unlike some of the armies in the region.
All right, stay with me as I bring those breaking inputs for our viewers. In fact, in the latest inputs, we can tell you that the president of Nepal, Ramchandra Podal, has also resigned. He's in fact one of the last one in the string of high-profile resignations that Nepal has witnessed today. It began with 4 ministers, one of them being the Home Minister, and then soon was followed by Nepal's Prime Minister CP Sharma Oli. And in the latest that we can bring to you is that President Ramchandra Podal has resigned. And in other breaking inputs also, what we are learning is that the army chief in Nepal will also be making an address. Remember, the situation remains extremely volatile on the ground level. We've just shown you how the wife of a former prime minister of Nepal has been burnt as well. She suffered severe burn injuries and she was in fact lying collapsed. But in the latest, amid this kind of mounting pressure on the political elite of KP Sharma Oli's government, in fact, in the latest, what we can tell you is that President Ramchandra Podal has also resigned. I quickly go back to Akhilesh, who continues to stay with us. So, Akhilesh, take us through what do you make of the political scenario at the moment? Is this an indication that early elections are now the need of the hour?
Yeah, I've actually said it in public already. In order for us not to derail from the constitutional process and stick to constitutionalism, perhaps the best way out is early elections.
All right, we'll try and fix your frame in the meantime, but I want to just keep taking our viewers to all the latest inputs coming in. In the latest, what we can tell you is President Ramnath Podal has resigned over there, and Akhilesh is back with us. Akhilesh, yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah. What I have been saying, including in my social media post, is the best way out, in order for Nepal to not derail the constitutional process or constitutionalism, the best way out perhaps is declare an early election, and the country then goes through political transition, but also cathartic process of then cleansing itself. And new leaders will emerge, as they all do in these crisis situations. And new parties will coalesce and say, okay, we'll shake hands. Those guys will not do, And these are also opportunities, if handled well, the time for when the changes take a pace fast. Instead of like years, this just happen in 2 days, 6 days, 6 months. And I would like to say, as I already said in my post, maybe give it a 6-month time, army or the law and order comes to place, new forces coalesce together or emerge, new leaders will have a more political buy-in with the public. Yeah, and then it will be a smoother transition towards election than declaring it overnight and then the national apparatus, the state apparatus being completely unprepared.
All right, stay with me, Akhilesh. I'm also joined in by our correspondent Siddhant, who's been tracking all the latest developments for us from Nepal. In fact, Siddhant, if you could shed more light on the resignations that have just come in, not to forget the severe burn marks that have been suffered by the wife of the former Prime Minister of Nepal.
Well, as we were discussing before, it's a complete breakdown of law and order in Kathmandu. In fact, all the senior leadership of Kathmandu, their houses have been attacked. They have been attacked. In fact, Deoba family was rescued. Both Arzu Deoba and her relatives were rescued by the locals as a mob attacked their house. The same was the case with KP Oli's personal residence. It was attacked. President's personal residence was attacked. So it's a complete breakdown of law and order in Nepal at this point in time. What we're getting to know is that army is going to take over the administration. That's what Manoj Gupta is bringing for us. But how that's going to happen, we really don't know. But we could expect in some time from now, there could be a briefing by the Nepalese army, perhaps announcing the takeover.
All right. In terms of the kind of attacks that have taken place, what are you learning from your sources, Siddhant? Who is responsible for these attacks? Many protesters have in fact gone on record to deny that it is not the Gen Z protesters who have resorted to this kind of arson and violence, but we do see many are in fact the youth which are taking to this kind of violence on the streets of Kathmandu. We seem to have lost that connection with Siddhant, but let's quickly go back to Akhilesh, who continues to stay with us. So, Akhilesh, from what the feelers we are getting at the moment is that the army is going to step in on expected lines.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's time.
But you say it is time. What does one now expect next? In how many months or days can one expect general elections to take place?
I haven't followed elections, the process of elections so closely now. I would like to think, as with a country as large, comparatively large, it's not Bhutan by any stretch. It's going to take time, to get the roles in order, election roles in order, but also many other things like election officials. There could be a lot of changes in the election process itself, I don't know. I mean, this is up in the air for now, but I would like to say 6 months would be a good time when there will be a political buy-in to buy-in of new actors in the process, and but also the bureaucracy begins to get its acts together. I would like to say, it's a very, very top of the mind cutoff point. I would say 6 months.
All right. In fact, going to slip into a quick break. Stay with me, Akhilesh. We have plenty to discuss right now as Nepal stands at a turning point as far as the politics in the nation is concerned. With that, we're slipping into a quick break. Stay tuned to Nation at 5 as we return with the latest news and updates.
Huge development. The Nepalese Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, who is in his third term, who's been Prime Minister over a little over a year now, has just put in his papers. That's the word. He had called for an all-party meeting later this evening where we're given to understand that he will make this official. He will officially say this to all the parties concerned. Hundreds of thousands of young protesters, nicknamed the Gen Z protesters, they came down, they stormed the Nepalese parliament building because they were sick and tired of the status quo of politics in Nepal over the last 30 years.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Joining us here on CNN News 18, huge story breaking in the neighborhood. The Nepalese Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, who's been a sort of a semi-permanent fixture in Nepali politics over the last 30 years, he has now tendered in his resignation. His current government, I think this is his third stint in power, his current government, which was an uneasy coalition between him, the Nepali Congress, and a section of the Maoist party. It was an uneasy coalition that had been in power for the last year or so now. And now, given these massive scale protests that we've seen, led by young people, the trigger being, of course, the social media ban, but it goes far beyond that. Issues of corruption, unemployment, privileges, dynastic politics, curbs on young people speaking their mind, all of this sort of came into a deadly cocktail. It came into a deadly combination, which finally ended up consuming the current Prime Minister, Mr. Oli, who has tendered in his resignation. The latest information that we have is that Mr. Oli has been given safe escort by an army chopper. Him and his immediate family members have been taken to an army barrack where they will be kept for some time. CNN News 18 broke this story first to you. We were the first ones to tell you that Mr. Oli has put in his papers. He has officially sent in his resignation to the Nepalese president, Mr. Paudel, whose resignation has now been accepted. At 12:05 p.m., we told you about Mr. Oli planning to step down. It was clear earlier this morning itself. The RSP party quit, 4 ministers quit. The writing on the wall was clear as day to the Nepalese Prime Minister that he's fast losing support and he needs to step down. At 2:16 p.m., officially, KP Sharma Oli, Prime Minister of Nepal, put in his papers and stepped down as Prime Minister after being given safe passage by the military, an assurance of safe passage by the Nepal Army Chief. Let me go across to Darshan, who's a Nepali journalist, who is joining us live from Kathmandu. Darshan, so Mr. Oli, the long-serving Prime Minister of Nepal, has finally quit. Do we know where he is? He's apparently been taken in an army helicopter to some safe passage. And what happens next, Darshan? Who becomes the next Prime Minister? What is the next government going to be like? Is there any word about what is happening?
So there is a lot of protest right now. Like though I'm in a safe place right now, I can hear a lot of screaming and the cloud which is filled with the smoke. So I'm not sure which are the buildings that has been into fire, but yeah, the PM Oli finally resigned. But it's not about a new government. It's a generational war. Like I mentioned earlier, Gen Z are like crazy, and there is also a lot of riots that's happening. And there is no one to take a lead at this time. But Gen Z are also, looking after Balin to come forward to control this chaos. Because right now there are protesters inside parliamentary building, inside the Singha Darbar, where all the ministries used to handle their places, and there are also many data centers that have very critical information. And right now there is no presence of the government in the street. Nepal police and APF have already said that the situation is not in our control. So it's chaos everywhere.
So tell me, where is the Nepalese army? Are they protecting these sensitive installations, the parliament building, the secretariat, the houses of various ministers? We're told that military choppers were sent to some of these houses to evacuate the ministers. What is the latest in terms of, how this story is unfolding there, and what are the demands of these young people? Because it started with the social media ban, but it seems like this is pent-up anger. For a number of reasons, from corruption to unemployment, which is all blown over now in Nepal.
Right, exactly. And the bigger, scope here, it's like I have been saying that it was also, social media ban took, maybe it helped to escalate things, but it is one of the only reason, the main focus.
Welcome back to our live and rolling coverage on the political crisis in Nepal. In the latest, what we can tell you is that Ramchandra Podal, who is the president of Nepal, has tendered in his resignation. This after Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned, as nationwide protests have been spiraling out of control. Despite the withdrawal of the controversial orders, the unrest is raging on. arson, vandalism can now be witnessed on the streets, with in fact the political elite being also attacked. In fact, the wife of the former Prime Minister was brutally attacked. She's also suffered burn injuries. In fact, getting in some breaking inputs, Kathmandu Mayor Balan Saha has appealed for peace, is what we can tell you. He's saying that all of Nepal's leaders who killed the protesters have in fact quit. Now it is time to maintain order. So remember, the message is crystal clear that it is time to have a new beginning in Nepal, and all those who were responsible for the heinous killing of those young Gen Z protesters, 19 of them so far. What Saha has gone on to say is that all of the political dispensation have tendered in their resignations, and hence let peace prevail in Kathmandu. Let me quickly go across to Siddhant, who brings us those breaking inputs. Yes, Siddhant.
Well, that's right. So he appears to be a leader who has always been critical of Oli and his administration, Akanksha. In fact, this morning also he said that what has happened in yesterday in Kathmandu is nothing but an act of terror. Perhaps a very strong statement he made at the very beginning of the protest. So, in terms of he is one leader who still enjoys some level of credibility, in Nepal, because all the other, we have been seeing in last couple of hours what has happened. Their houses have been attacked. They were attacked. But this one leader, the mayor of Kathmandu, still enjoys some level of credibility. So now this appeal is coming from his side. He is appealing to the protesters to offer restraint. Perhaps the army has also appealed to people. The chief secretary has also, cabinet secretary has also made the appeal. So, the bureaucracy is now coming ahead. Perhaps because ultimately they have to run the country now, because the complete leadership has resigned, or they will resign because there is no option left for them. The army is likely to take over, and few credible faces, the political faces, perhaps could be seen leading the country in days to come.
All right, and when you say that, Saha is seen as a very pro-youth figure and somebody who is also against KP Sharma Oli and his political ideologies, is that enough for him to establish the credentials to be seen as a prospective leader in Nepal?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, he was, Akanksha, as I said, that there was also this hidden demand of these protesters that a leadership should be passed on to the younger generation. Enough of Deobas, Prachandas and Olis in Nepal. And they have been ruling one by one. So, this was a demand of the protesters that a young leadership should take the center stage. So he is perhaps one face who could, I mean, it's very early at this point in time, but who could get a support of Gen Z protesters. And perhaps if Gen Z protesters are going to be the stakeholders in deciding the future of Nepal, then definitely Mayor of Kathmandu would have an important role.
Siddhant, I want to quickly bring you in on the point of these so-called Gen Z protesters, the role that youth has been playing, particularly in all the political upheavals that we've seen in South Asian nations. To begin with, you've had Bangladesh being the most recent, you have Sri Lanka, you have Myanmar, the role that the youth have played in all of these protests.
Well, definitely, many are calling it a same toolkit being applied in various countries of the region. In fact, in India also, many experts and commentators are saying so. But definitely, but going by what I have been getting to know from friends, journalists in Kathmandu, there was anger against the government. And as I said, that there was a massive protest in Kathmandu in April on the issue of electricity bill, because they were protesting against the senior electricity department official. So, the protest used to be a very, very common thing taking place in Kathmandu in last 1 year since Prime Minister Oli coming to power. So whether it's the pro-monarchy demand, etc., etc. So, this was happening in one or the other form. But this is perhaps for the first time that, people have come in such a large numbers onto the streets and made sure that this government resigns. So as this was in the making, it was brewing up and finally, happened. But what is happening now, Akanksha, is a matter of huge concern because complete lawlessness on the street, breakdown of law and order, no army, no police. The parliament has been set ablaze. Hilton Hotel has been set ablaze. The private residences of the politicians are being attacked. The Supreme Court has been attacked. Television channels are being attacked. So, there's nobody to control this mob. Now, the peaceful protesters, till day before yesterday, have turned into mob now. They have become rioters today, and they are rioting, arsoning on the streets of Kathmandu. So the talent for the law enforcement authorities is to get it stopped and to make sure that each and everyone obey the curfew that is already in place in Kathmandu.
Perhaps it's fairly nascent to ask that question, but the other question from the India point of view is also how is all of these developments shaping up? What will they mean for India and China both?
Well, as far as Mr. Oli's position is concerned, Akanksha, as per my understanding, he was never New Delhi's favorite. That's for sure because of his closeness with the Chinese leadership. But definitely New Delhi always had a very warm equation with his government. In fact, the foreign minister of Nepal visited India, and Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri was in Nepal in the month of June. In fact, he called on Prime Minister Oli, met his Nepalese counterpart. So the relations were cordial, but he was never liked so much by the Indian leadership. That is something which I have understood. And perhaps this is also one of the reasons that in last 1 year, there has been no visit of CP Oli to India. He is perhaps the only Nepalese Prime Minister who has never visited India in his tenure.
All right, many thanks to you, Siddhant, for bringing us all those inputs. In fact, getting in some more breaking inputs shared by Securities Editor Mr. Manoj Gupta. CNN News 18 has decoded the possible scenario in Nepal, how this will now play up. The army chief, remember, is going to address in some time from now. He will be urging the people in Nepal, particularly these Gen Z protesters, to maintain peace, law and order. He's unlikely to announce a takeover, but the army will manage things in the interim for a few days till the new interim advisor or the chief is in fact decided upon. They will have someone like Rabi Lamchani who is acceptable to all and make an interim government. In fact, Anand Narasimhan joins me from the newsroom with more inputs. Anand, please go ahead and share with us the possible options currently for the people of Nepal.
One of the scenarios, even as Nepali media actually is reporting, that the president also has resigned. Although there is no major confirmation of the same, is the fact that the army takes over to try and restore law and order. What we are seeing is that the protests are slowly turning violent, not just against the incumbents and the leaders who the people were sick of because of corruption and because of mismanagement and law and impunity, absence of law and order and impunity, but it could turn into anarchy on the streets and rioting and random arson and loot. And that is something which the army can ill afford, and perhaps the army will immediately call for peace and attempt to restore law and order on the streets of Nepal, while promising that they are not completely taking over. There is no martial law, but a temporary state of emergency till the time there is an interim government that is put in place, and also to restore the path of democracy, or Nepal back onto the path of democracy. There are a few front runners who can be the young leaders in Balen Shah, the Kathmandu mayor. But right now, like you said, Rabi Lamchani could be the interim advisor. Ironically, and perhaps coincidence, that it's a very similar playbook to Colombo, to Dhaka, that we are witnessing in Kathmandu, Akanksha, and that cannot escape the viewer's attention. But for the moment in Nepal, the army chief is going to address, Mr. Sigdel, the army chief, is going to address the nation, and the call will be to immediately seize all violence, loot, arson, and vacate the streets. And perhaps by dawn tomorrow, there will be peace, and by afternoon, there could be an interim government in place at the helm with Rabi Lamchani at the helm. So that's one of the scenarios that's possible. We still are waiting a full official confirmation from the Nepal President's office on Ramchandra Paudel, although many are claiming that he has also resigned. It's unlikely because it's the president who will have powers and the army will have to, he's the supreme commander. So if the president resigns, then it's absolute chaos because there's nobody to take control and then it will be left to the army. So we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold there, because the rule book says that the president has to declare a state of emergency, ask the army to take charge, and then the army chiefs moves forward. We'll have to see, because the president's office did put out a letter confirming the acceptance of KP Sharma Oli's resignation, and the demand is that the rest of the leaders in the Nepal cabinet should also resign.
Anand, we speak on a day, 9th September, which will go down in the annals of history as far as Nepal is concerned. Take us through how this entire day has unfolded, from the resignations of the various ministers, including the Home Minister, to the ones who were even chased down the streets, a kind of arson, vandalism, not to forget the resignation of the Prime Minister himself. And as you're rightly highlighting, it could also be the President.
Well, CNN News 18 was the first to report that that KP Sharma Oli will go, while others were saying that he's going to remain defiant, and the KP Sharma Oli's office itself said that he is going to remain defiant and he's not going to leave. He is now out of Kathmandu, but he's not leaving Nepal. But earlier in the day, they said that he's not going to step down and he thinks he's got a handle on the situation. But clearly, there was already indication that it's a matter of hours, not even days, that KP Sharma Oli will resign. And it was perhaps further hastened when top ministers in his cabinet started resigning on moral grounds and saying that there is no control of law and order, and the killing of the youth, perhaps that was the big trigger there when the forces tried to, and some in point blank and some right there on their forehead, were shot dead. And that's where it said enough is enough. Largely with the News 18 team on ground, Anand Tiwari, Tahir, and so many of our other colleagues on ground, the sentiment from Nepalganj all the way to Kathmandu has been, we are sick and tired of the corruption and the impunity with which the law and order was being abused by these netas and these privileged. And that's why all former prime ministers, their private residences have been attacked, and they have personally been attacked, be it Sher Bahadur Deoba, be it Mr. Kanal, be it KP Sharma Oli, whose statue was broken out. Now we've got more tragic news that's come in from the Kanal residence.
In fact, stay with me, Anand. We're getting in breaking inputs. What we're learning is that the former Nepalese Prime Minister Jhalanath Kanal's wife, she has finally, eventually succumbed to those burn injuries. Remember, just minutes ago, we were playing out those tragic visuals of his wife who had completely collapsed on the road. And now in some deeply tragic and disturbing news coming in, what we're learning is that Kanal's wife has succumbed to those burn injuries. In fact, those are the visuals that we are bringing to you, which go on to show that Kanal's wife had suffered these major injuries. There were people rescuing her. The forces also tried checking in on her, but perhaps it was just too late by the time she was rushed to the hospital. She had faced severe burn marks, and in very deeply tragic news, what we can tell you is that she's eventually succumbed to those burn injuries. Nepal continues to burn, and CNN News 18 is continuing to track all the latest developments in the South Asian nation. Stay tuned. In fact, we are closing right now as Plain Speak is up next.
Brought to you by This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Joining us here on CNN News 18, huge story breaking in the neighborhood. The Nepalese Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, who's been a sort of a semi-permanent fixture in Nepali politics over the last 30 years, he has now tendered in his resignation. His current government, I think this is his third stint in power, his current government, which was an uneasy coalition between him, the Nepali Congress, and a section of the Maoist party. It was an uneasy coalition that had been in power for the last year or so now, and now given these massive scale protests that